Part 2, this is signs of learned helplessness. Look at this list with me. Look at the list. Go through it one by one and tell me, who does this remind you of? Probably your ex-boyfriend. This was probably the reason he became an ex-boyfriend, right? And I just think that in men, there's this overlap of learned helplessness and entitlement that makes it especially persistent and like difficult to battle. And that's why a lot of women just end up giving up. I want to make it clear, I'm not saying men are born like this. I think they are conditioned into this by society. And I think men who want to actively avoid being like this have to work really hard against the status quo. Let me just precede everything I'm going to say with that. This is not some sort of like me saying that men are biologically like this. This is what entitlement and easy ramps, this is what being prioritized over women for no good reason actually leads to. Having women do everything and absorb everything and absorb men's behavior and fix men's behavior and correct men's behavior and undo the effects of men's behavior only resulted in this sad ass lack of traits that I think as women we've just started noticing on the large with men. So let me just talk about what some of these things look like, like in real life. Hear me clearly when I say this. Video games are not always bad. Playing video games is not bad every time. Not all men who play video games are bad. If you come across a man who is really into video games, like hours and hours, like they're probably feeling a lack of control over the outcome of situations, and they rely on video gaming to sort of soothe that, because that's something you can have a lot of control over. And it's video games specifically because it's a virtual reality. First of all, it's like low entry barrier and it doesn't require a lot of investment, but it provides you a feeling of control, feeling of like, I'm a winner even if you're not. Any sort of compulsive use of anything, right? Pornography, substances, to control the outcome of a situation. Like, oh, I don't like where this night is going, so I'm gonna go ahead and get effed up because there's only one outcome of that situation. I'm not happy with my intimate life, so I'm gonna turn to porn because it allows me to control the situation from where I stand. Men are basically known by this in humor, right? The man who will never stop to ask for directions. A lot of men will just outright reject help. They don't want it. They know how to do everything. They don't need you telling them, and you're not their mom, and etc., etc. That's because of learned helplessness. That's because they don't want to be held for consequences of their actions. And that's why they don't like to ask for help. They like to just do things and then pretend like it was all out of their control the whole entire time. And well, I didn't know, and how could I have known better? And it's like, well, you could ask for help. You could have Googled it. You could have called somebody, but you didn't. And then that causes women to resent these men because the solution is so simple. And really, this kind of behavior, you start to realize that it's coming from a place of weakness rather than a place of strength, the way that we've always been taught. And that kind of tends to give a lot of women the ick. Now, even though low self-esteem affects a lot of people, and I think definitely a lot of women, but I think for men, they have this very specific type of low self-esteem where it can only be satisfied and put to rest by competition and not by inner work and inner acceptance. It has to come from an external source. Why a lot of time men will want like a really independent woman or a really, successful woman till they realize they're actually threatened by that, and then they start cheating on her in order to win this perceived competition. But it is an attempt to like silence their low self-esteem by doing something that will receive an external reaction. Does that make sense? Why there's a lot of that sort of like needless competition from men one to another. Like rather than competing for a woman's actual attention, they'd rather compete with another man to like try to win a woman over. With decreased motivation and putting less effort into tasks, this is something that women report very, very consistently, especially in long-term relationships with men. 5, 7, 8, 10-year relationships really, really suffer from this. Because at some point, the woman starts to realize like, wow, we haven't said I love you in a week. We haven't kissed in several days. Like, he used to get me flowers all the time and now he just doesn't. This learned helplessness. All of that is like him just wondering like, why'd I do that stuff in the first place? And just not considering you worth the effort. He doesn't really want to change or affect anything about your relationship. He'd rather it stay the way it is so that he has to put less effort in. And that stems from a lack of persistence, right? Like the happiest marriages you see tend to be the marriages where both people, but very specifically the husband, because this is so uncommon in our society, is very consistent with something, right? So whether it be he's gotten his wife flowers every week for the past 50 years, or, he always helps her take her shoes off when she gets home. It's a certain snack that she likes and he always makes sure it's there. Like something like that. Those are the marriages that tend to last because that's really all women need. Women just need to know that there's persistence and consistency in how that man is going to treat you. As a woman, you have come with that pre-installed. Like men really do expect consistency and persistence from women when it comes to raising children, when it comes to, putting up with daily monotonous house tasks. Like your husband expects you to do all of that. Most husbands expect their wives to like do the dishes every night and make dinner and all that, but they don't expect to do anything at all that persistently or that consistently. And it's specifically the husbands that do stick to something like that. And it could even be as little as, you know, some women are like, he just sends me that I love you text every day, and that's all I really need. That small little bit of attention. And that's enough. And those marriages tend to succeed because they're not based on learned helplessness. The man in that scenario is not unmotivated and unpersistent and inconsistent. When it comes to things that are new to them, a lot of men tend to be prone to feelings of frustration, and some men even act on them, like punching things, punching walls, you know, raising their voice, things like that. Whereas women are always taught that you'll catch more flies with honey, and you know, you're not allowed to show your frustration. It's a mean and backwards way of teaching this, but it still teaches you emotional regulation. And it's something that a lot of women have and men don't. That feelings of frustration that comes specifically from a lack of being able to emotionally regulate yourself. Just in general, a lot of men will tend to be really passive, and you know, one of the main complaints I often read about husbands in general online is he doesn't want to do anything. He would rather just sit there and like not do anything. Just wants to watch TV or play video games or do something like passive that just wastes hours and hours of his time. Meanwhile, the kids and I want to go to the zoo. We want to go have a picnic. We want to go for a walk. We want to go to the park. And all he wants to do is just sit there and just exist. Like the ultimate passiveness, you know? And of course, we all know by now that when push comes to shove, most men will just give up, especially when their wives, their partners get diagnosed with terminal or life-threatening diseases, especially when first kid comes into the picture. A lot of men just tend to bounce because it's harder than they thought. They just give up and they just let the current take them to the next easiest thing. And it's no wonder, I don't know if you will be able to see this up at the top, but it says that learned helplessness increases the risk of mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. We are seeing those numbers a lot in men. Even though it goes diagnosed, we can still tell that they are depressed and anxious from the numbers of men versus women who just are choosing to exit the simulation, so to speak. It's definitely men that seem to be struggling with these mental health conditions more. And I'm assuming this is all connected. I'm out of phone storage space, so I'm going to have to edit and post part 1 and 2. But keep an eye out for part 3, because in part 3, we're going to talk about practically what your life would look like if you were to share it with somebody like this. Okay, I love you. Godspeed. I'll see you in part 3.